Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, where we bring you some of the key developments in India's financial sector. The first story today, the interministerial group set up to address the financial stress in the telecom sector has prepared a draft report recommending steps to benefit the industry. Reports say that Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has reviewed the report, extending the deferred payment schedule to 16 years, cut in interest rates and converting the prime lending rate or the PLR into the MCLR or the marginal cost of funds based lending rate are among the measures being considered by the IMG. To help us understand the story better, we have in studio two esteemed guests. We've got Harvir Singh, editor of Outlook Hindi, joining us here, and also Ravi Visvesvaraya, Sharada Prasad, independent telecom consultant with us. Ravi, if I could start with you first. We understand that the government has also asked updated balance sheets from these telecom companies, not just domestically but overseas as well.
Yes, I think this is really necessary. Some of the measures are necessary, and we have to see that a lot of these will really have to be done by the banks in order to protect their interests, because otherwise there's a very strong risk of the loans turning bad, and the banks, the public sector banks especially, will not be able to recover their bad loans. Also, we have to see that how much of this is really due to the fault of the telecom operators themselves, and how much is it due to the policy problems. You have a precedent that in 1999, the then Vajpayee government bailed out all the telecom operators by shifting them from a fixed license fee to a revenue share arrangement. And at that time, it was entirely the fault of the operators. Yes. It was not a government policy fault. It was entirely the fault of the operators that they got themselves into a mess, because in 1995, there had been these huge amounts, exorbitant amounts, for the licenses, and then they found that they could not pay those license fees.
Yes.
And the government took a policy decision to bail out a stretched sector. Then basically you also have to see that this is not, the telecom operators are not a sector in isolation, but the telecommunications is an infrastructure that has tremendous multiplier effects on the economy. It is a cost saver, it is a time saver, and it has extreme multiplier effects. A study by ICRIER showed that a 10% increase in mobile phone penetration, just voice penetration, increased the GDP by about 1.5%, and a 10% increase in broadband penetration, in data broadband penetration, increases the GDP by almost 3%.
Okay.
So you have to look at telecommunications in terms of its multiplier effect in the economy, increasing the velocity of business, decreasing time. So some of these measures that the finance minister is considering are really necessary to bail out the sector. Now, the present scenario is a little more clear-cut than it was in 1999, because some of the problems of the telecom sector are not due to the fault of the operators, as was the case in 1999. It started really with the Supreme Court judgment of February 2012, cancelling the 122 licenses and asking them to rebid and for the licenses. That put a lot of stress on the bank loans, because some companies went out of business. The public sector banks took a hit. About 100,000 people lost their jobs, all because of the Supreme Court judgment.
Yes.
And operators went out of business. So that was the cause of the problems. Then the government and the TRAI also had to take some of the blame, because they put these very high reserve fees for the spectrum auctions. The operators had to rebid for the metro licenses after their term had expired.
All right.
And so the costs went up. Also, some of the average revenue per user, the ARPUs, have been going down. A lot of it has been because of the entry of Jio. And some of these are structural changes in the industry.
Yes, the indication is that it is the Jio factor that has, of course, pushed them further into the stressful situation struggling at this point.
Also affected the industry greatly, because about over 90% of the users in India are prepaid users and small users who recharge on a daily or every few days.
All right.
And they needed cash in order to recharge, and that market got hit because of demonetization.
All right. Harvir, Ravi mentioned those bad loans there. And, as far as bad loans are concerned, we do know that the government is still trying to bail out banks, and, the status of NPAs, what really to do with that is something that is still being questioned. The government's still mulling over that as well. So a lot of people questioning why at this moment do we need these SOPs, perhaps for the telecom companies, which is also seen as a sector that is a thriving industry. Yes, it has suffered in the past few years, but nonetheless, compared to many other sectors, this can still manage for a while.
Actually, Ravi explained very well. If we go back since 95, then this new telecom policy 99, whatever the reason behind this, from migration from license fee to revenue sharing. Then in the meantime, we have seen many CAG report that telecom companies misreported revenue or underreporting of revenue because they have to share revenue with the government. But at the same time, he is right that it is not only the fault of the telecom companies. Definitely they are also on fault. They are also on the wrong side, because when you are going to do some business, you make some cost benefit analysis and long term approach towards the business. Why are you entering into this business? But there was some disruption which were beyond their control, like as you mentioned, the re-auction of spectrum. And when but suddenly everybody came for this 3G, which virtually failed in our country, and they bid very high for spectrum fee at that time. But it was a win-win game for government as well as the telecom companies, because they bid at higher price. Government cornered a lot of revenue. Government asked banks to lend them, and even gave them this option to pay in installments and all. But I think something was very wrong on policy front. So nobody was clear what is going to happen to the sector. Unnecessarily, even they bid at a very high price, and revenue was not in that line. At the same time, licensing continuously remained a very controversial thing in this sector particularly.
And I understand they are, of course, asking for a reduction in that license
companies were allowed
fee, but that is not something that the ING is looking at. Some companies were allowed
to migrate into mobile services. The licenses were for landline, fixed line. Some companies took the license for one and then acquired another company to do this. And definitely, the biggest disruption was due to Jio. But even there are two sections in the mobile industry or telecom industry basically. One is Jio, another is Rest, and they are fighting with each other. And definitely there are some loopholes. Jio is also using from the policy, this thing, telecom policy. But it is a responsibility of the authority or regulator or the government to clear the issues very at the same time. Even telecom companies are also at the fault for providing good service to the consumer. See the situation of the services right now. We have very large number of call drops. PRI went for this thing, but the Supreme Court did not allow. But in fact, that even in policy framework, we don't know how to safeguard the interests of the consumer, how to keep the policy in the right direction, and how to stop someone to take benefit out of this, some loopholes which are in the policy. Maybe someone has entered in the market with a huge deep pockets and coming with predatory pricing and all, giving the free services. But it's the job of the policy maker or the regulator to look into it, what is going to happen. If already telecommunication is a really very important infrastructure for the economy, and it has changed the life, it has changed the economy, it has changed the working style from your housemate to the CEO of a company or even defense sector or government sector, everything. So in the just in 1.5 decade or so. But it means that if things are going bad, companies are going to bust due to this lack of revenue and wrong policies. So we have to see what is happening, why it is happening in this way. So even government should take some blame on this issue.
All right. And some of those measures that, of course, I mentioned earlier to our viewers, those are measures which seem feasible. Do you feel so? And do we see them actually getting implemented soon?
Well, they are feasible, but certainly we'll have to look at, is it right for the public sector banks, which are after all funded by the taxpayer, to bail out private sector companies or not? And we had to see this like, is this sector too important to fail? Yes, it is too important to fail, which was a decision also taken by the Vajpayee government. Now you look at the 1999 Vajpayee government. Morally and legally it was all wrong. Pragmatically it was the correct thing to do. They bailed out a sector and the sector boomed because of that. And actually it gave back moving from a fixed license fee, which was a contractual obligation to pay all those 85,000 crore kinds of bids, actually bailed out the sector, and the government actually got more revenue over a period of time because of a revenue share as compared to what it would have got under a fixed fee arrangement. Now again, we'll have to see, is this sector is too important to fail because it has a vast multiplier effect. It is an essential sector. We have things like the reversal of the digital divide. We have e-governance, M-governance, M-health, everything. Now, the question, what is the level of subsidy you do? We'll have to see, like, what were the factors beyond the control of operators? Some of it was because of the government policy, the very high reserve prices after the Supreme Court judgment of February 2012. And at the risk of contempt of court, I'm saying that Supreme Court judgment was wrong in retrospect. It might have been legally the correct thing to do, but pragmatically it was totally the wrong thing to do, because it put the whole sector into the tailspin. It just went, the sector went disastrous down there. Now, there are also the structural changes coming in because the entry of Geo, the move from voice to data, the kind of, we're at the cusp, we're at a crisis point at the cusp, where if you take some of the right decisions now, you actually, the government will benefit. Now, what we have to do, actually, it's there are three competing interests. First is the immediate revenue to the exchequer, which is what the government and the CAG are focusing on. The second are the benefits to the consumers. And the third is the benefits, the health of the industry, the operators.
Absolutely.
And this is a, it's not an easy equation, because it's a complicated game theory
And clearly, as we've seen since 1999, and especially since 2012, it needs to be a long-term solution.
Oh, absolutely.
We can't just rely on a sudden boom or a sudden stress in the industry. Harvir, very quickly, since we're running short of time.
The consumers will benefit if the tariffs are low, and the tariffs will be low, the spectrum is low.
But so do we see this getting implemented? So is there a time frame that has been set, Harvir?
No, I think the committee's recommendation and finance ministry looking into it. It is not easy even for the government to bail out the sector in a simple manner, because already banks are also fighting. They are under stress. NPAs are very high, and if government will allow particular one sector to get benefits of a low interest rate and some write-offs or some readjustment, I think there will be very big criticism also. But at the same time, definitely very important sector for economy, for common man, for so government needs to do something very important for the sector to keep it survive.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. RVS Prasad, thank you so much for joining us. Harvir, I believe you'll be continuing with us on the other topic as well, but that's it, at least as far as the telecom companies are concerned, that we're discussing here on Policy Watch. But still ahead, the government mulls LPG-like subsidy transfer for PDS food grain. We'll discuss that in detail after the break. Stay with us.
राष्ट्रपति भवन में स्क्रीनिंग की थी, तो जो रिश्तेदार हैं प्रेम सहगल के और शाहनवाज़ खान के, वो भी थे वहाँ पर, और शाहनवाज़ खान की पूरी फैमिली थी वहाँ पर, उनके ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन, उनकी डॉटर इन लॉ, और उन सब ने आके मुझे गले लगाया और उन्होंने कहा कि जो हमारे ग्रैंडफादर थे वो बिल्कुल ऐसे ही थे, और हमें बहुत ज़्यादा खुशी हुई है जिस तरह से आपने इनको प्ले किया है.
Really excited to be here watching the premieres. Hopefully everyone will like it. It's a film that every Indian, everyone could be proud of.
Welcome back to Policy Watch. Now, in our second topic today, we're looking at the Food Ministry's plans to subsidy transfer for public distribution system of subsidized food grains. Now, this will be on the lines of the LPG subsidy transfer scheme. The beneficiaries will get the subsidy amount in advance in their bank accounts, and they will have to buy the food grains from any ration shop which has got the electronic POS devices. The ministry hopes that this initiative will ensure zero leakage of the subsidy and food grains as well. Joining us to explain the measures better, we have in studio, in fact, continue to have Harvir Singh, editor of Outlook Hindi, with us, and also now joined by social activist Biraj Patnaik. Biraj, first of all, how do you see this development? Is this something that can be worked on?
Well, I think there are a lot of course, activists who are opposed to the very idea of any kind of subsidy transfer. But my personal view is that this can be made to work if we put in place the conditions that are necessary to make it work. And there are three conditions. One, of course, a foolproof method of identification. Second, the IT infrastructure. And third is a mobile network.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, as you know, that and fourth, a banking network. These are the four essential conditions to make a direct subsidy transfer work. And the principle is very simple, that instead of giving the food grain to the shopkeeper at a subsidized rate, Suppose the food grain is 15 rupees a kilo. Today, government gives it at 3 rupees. And there is an incentive for the shopkeeper to sell it at 15 rupees outside. You will give it to the shopkeeper at 15 rupees. The customer, who's the right holder, will buy it at 15 rupees. And suppose the price, subsidized price is 5, 10 rupees will be deposited by the government in their bank account. Okay. Very similar to what you have in LPG transfer thing. It is likely to work in large parts of urban India, but I'm afraid that we don't have the infrastructure ready on all 4 parameters. Neither the banking infrastructure, as you know, it's a big issue.
Yes.
The POS machines have failed spectacularly everywhere. It's been universal in their failure. And third, mobile telephony has not reached the areas where the poorest people live in this country. So I think in the absence of that, it would be advisable that it is rolled out in a very careful, deliberated manner,
yes,
evidence-based. Government had done 3 pilots in Chandigarh, in Daman and Diu, and in Pondicherry. And a planning commission report has just been released, which was of an evaluation done independently, and that has shown that in all 3 places there were huge operational problems. So unless you tackle those operational problems, you won't be able to roll it out successfully.
And we understand the next pilot is going to be rolled out in Ranchi, Harvir. So, you know, how do you assess this? Do you agree with, with Mr. Patnaik here that, you know, there needs to be proper assessment and only then go ahead with this plan?
No, I agree with Viraj. You know that really is a very good concept, very good idea, and definitely it will stop the leakage in a big way, if not 100%, but in a big way. But you know, any idea is not always workable, and we don't have an ideal situation.
But that
in
was
our
what
country.
was said even of the LPG subsidy.
That's why. That's why there are many consumers who are not able to get subsidy. At the same time, in LPG, it is when you buy the gas cylinder and pay the full price. After that, subsidy comes into your account because it cannot be in advance. You don't know whether you will buy or not. Here, LPG is a completely different product and different. But food is the basic and core. Yeah. And you know, when we have this National Food Security Act, and that is also not being implemented properly. What was the design? What was the objective? Yes. Already, major of that that already lost in the way. So, in halfway we are doing that. Another way, our focus is to save money, to save subsidy. Yes. That is the objective. Yes. Objective is not to basically to create more and more a very good efficient structure which will be the good for beneficiary. The here objective is different, to save the money, to basically stop the leakage. You know, already we know in our country, in many times, almost every month, there are some internet blockade. And we struggle within this national capital. Yes. We struggle sometime to get the connection.
That's right.
Think about the remote areas, 2 houses village or 15 houses village, where even roads are not there. At the same time, the most, I think the crucial thing will happen. You know, now government procures the food grain from the farmers, and government announced minimum support price. And the incentive behind that is that because government need food grain to distribute under PDS. Are we going to distort the structure also? Then who will buy the this food grain at minimum support price from the farmer? The only private operator will be there, because then where is the need of a shop in the market that only this PDS shop will be there, and then they will, if you are going to sell the produce at market price, whatever is the market price, or there may be a threshold price there, and the government is going to fill the gap with this money or whatever the price consumer is buying and the difference between the actual price.
Yes.
So who will decide about the price? Who will sell the produce? And you are going to create a different kind of complete new structure, and want before. Already our farmers are fighting and they are committing suicide, they are not getting the reasonable price for their produce. Right. And we are already going to destroy a structure which is little bit benefiting them, or creating a good thing for
at least comparatively
yes,
easier.
Yes, comparatively. Yes. So first we have to see
because
what
when
is the design behind this.
If you're trying to compare with LPG, you know, to get that gas cylinder, to get that connection, you obviously have to go to a proper authorized dealer, isn't it? And so therefore, in that sense, it was easy to track, it was easy, it was transparent in a certain extent at least. But in this case, you know, looking for those ration shops that actually have those machines, which perhaps are not even working, that in itself would be a challenge.
I think the big challenge is, and Harvir Singh is absolutely right in this, that the big challenge is to ensure that the National Food Security Act should be implemented in the spirit in which the act was written and drawn up and drafted and passed. And unfortunately, this government has just not paid any attention. As you know, the maternity entitlement in that was rolled out 3 years late. There are many reforms listed in the PDS, including trying to decentralize the shops, take it away from the private sector, give it to women's cooperatives and panchayats and so on, which is a Chhattisgarh model, very successful, tried out in many states now. Now, instead of pushing for those reforms which are tried and tested, doorstep delivery, decentralized procurement, instead of focusing on that, unfortunately, this government, as he's very rightly pointed out, their focus is only on curbing the subsidy rather than ensuring that people have their rights. And that is the mindset with which the DBT is coming in. So therefore, philosophically or ideologically, I have no issues with it.
Yes.
But looking at the track record of this government and the way things have unfolded, I am very apprehensive, particularly because of this report which has now come out of the Niti Aayog, which clearly shows that the implementation issues are going to be huge if it is not rolled out carefully.
And you know, as far as the National Food Security Act go, the beneficiaries, at least whatever places it seems to be working, does this clash with that?
Well, it is in states where it is working, where corruption has been brought down considerably, like Tamil Nadu or Bihar or Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh. In these states, there will be major disruption. Even the Aadhaar linkage to the ration card created a major disruption in these states, essentially because of the lack of a banking infrastructure that is reliable, the lack of internet connectivity, and a durable digital infrastructure that is common across the country and not, so there is interoperability. So these are the big problems. The benefits are also there. When you have a DBT, your entitlement will not be fixed to a shop, but you can draw it from anywhere.
Yes.
But for all of that, you need that digital infrastructure in place.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we don't have that.
You need to have that Aadhaar card.
You need to have bank accounts, you need to have Aadhaar cards, and unfortunately, except for Aadhaar element, where a lot of investment has been made to set up this infrastructure, the rest of the digital infrastructure is just not there. And even with Aadhaar, as you know, there is a court case, there are concerns on privacy and so on.
Right.
So I think it's a question, or to me, the food ministry, what it's doing is a classic example of a premature articulation of a policy, which is unlikely to work unless all these pieces are in place.
Harvir, finally, we're coming towards the end of course, the show, but, since this is being compared to the LPG scheme, give us a comparison of sorts of how, earlier too, there were criticisms of really how it would work, the LPG scheme. There was, of course, a lot of loopholes there as well. Initially, these were the kind of concerns that were brought out too. I mean, how is somebody going to get a bank account? How is it going to work eventually? Will actually people let go of their subsidies and, the ones who don't require it? There were a lot of questions that were raised, but somehow, at least as far as the data is concerned, if you look at the numbers, the scheme is benefiting around 176 million consumers is what being said, over 40,000 crores in fact being generated. Do you see a similarity, at least as far as, trying to implement these kind of scheme is concerned?
No, actually, I don't see any similarity between the two. Basically, completely, both of these things are completely separate.
Okay.
Food is the basic minimum requirement. As you see, if he doesn't get a gas cylinder, he may have some alternate or some substitute.
That's right.
But food, what is the substitute of food? And at the same time, you are making the process very, very tedious for him or her. Now, he or she goes to the shop, paid the money, takes the food grade and goes. Here, you are making it compulsory to them to go to the bank for some deposit or some withdrawal, then go to the shopkeeper. And when there is a crisis, there are so many people are sleeping without having food in this country.
Yes.
This is a big issue, and we are making them to pay upfront first full money at a market price, and then we'll ask them that money will come to your bank account. Even the banking system is not so proper, and in remote areas we don't have that infrastructure available, and you just want to start a thing which is really crucial for the life of the common man in this country.
Absolutely. All right, thank you so much to both of you for joining us on this particular topic, really. What we have established, of course, is the fact that challenges remain. It's better perhaps of the government to actually stick with what it has and, on the ground implement that first, and perhaps then try and put out new policies. We'll, of course, keep tracking developments on this front and, of course, on the development of the telecom companies as well that we discussed earlier before the break. That's it for the moment. Thank you, Biraj. Thank you, Harvir, for joining me on Policy Watch. That's it this week. Join us again next week. Thank you.